I mean, I must have been in that bathroom for hours, just like hemorrhaging blood and like trying to figure it out. And I remember standing outside the door to the bathroom and Kim was crying and she was like, there's no hole. There is no hole. Rachel, I can't, you don't I'm like, I swear there's a hole. Hi guys, it's Rach. And we're back for another episode of Ask Rach. If you would like to ask a question on the Ask Rach hotline, you're going to call 737-400-4626. You call and leave a voicemail. You can leave it anonymously. You can give your name, your email address. You can do whatever you want. You can do it. Okay, this is from Shay. It says she wants to ask about cycles, and there's almost nothing I love talking about more than my uterus, my period, the cycle, all of it, because learning this piece changed my freaking life. So let's hope that Shay has a very good question about this so we can all have a uterus combo together. Also, look at me drinking iced tea today. You know I'm a little espresso bitch, but today I made a special iced tea and it's making me so happy.
Hey Rach, this is Shay. I was calling because I'm wondering if you track your cycle or hormones by the moon, with the moon cycle. I've been hearing more about this like witchy stuff, and I just recently came off of birth control after like 6 years or something. And I'm just now getting into the flow, if you will.
Yep.
And I'm trying to like relearn my body and my cycle. And like, I feel like I haven't known my cycle since before I had a kid, really. So yeah. This is kind of brand new to me again. So, and I have way more information now, thanks to people like you and a lot of resources. But I've also been reading up on like the cycle of the moon, and even if your body doesn't necessarily, your cycle doesn't follow the moon cycle, like you're not getting your period with the new moon or the full moon or whatever. I'm just wondering if you are looking at that and using those things as reference, and I would love to hear more about that, because I feel like sometimes we look at the moon cycle and how we could be feeling based on that, but then that might be different than what our menstrual cycles are saying. So I'm just super curious about all this and wondering if you're into that. And if you've already addressed it, then sorry, my bad. I need to go back and listen to that episode.
Okay. Shay, first of all, never apologize. I literally wrote a book. It wasn't called Never Apologize, but never apologize for asking a question. I have talked about cycles quite a lot and hormones quite a lot. I have a fantastic episode for Shay and for anybody else who hasn't yet heard it. The conversation I had with my hormone doctor, this woman literally changed my life through natural supplements and knowledge. And my hormones were so out of whack. If you're interested in this at all, please go listen. It is episode 289, Dr. Julie Brush. That's 289. But let's you and I talk. Let me tell you what's going on. So first of all, I'm incredibly passionate about women understanding what their body is naturally supposed to be doing, as well as women understanding how much birth control can absolutely destroy what your body is naturally supposed to do. I spent most of my life, I would say up until 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, not at all understanding my cycle. I didn't know that men are the ones who establish a circadian rhythm. A circadian rhythm is 24 hours. So our entire world, our structure, everything is built around a circadian rhythm. What will happen in a 24-hour period? Why? Because men are on a circadian rhythm and men establish the world. So we still do things based on a 24-hour loop. But women, we don't become a whole new person every 24 hours. Our bodies work on an infradian rhythm, which is about a month long. So who you are on week 1 of your cycle is very different than who you are on week 3 of your cycle. We all know this. If you slow down and pay attention Actually, I shouldn't say that. We might not all know this. I didn't know this. When once a month I would feel like I was absolutely going crazy, when I would feel hopeless, when I would feel like everything was so hard, when I would feel super irritable, when all of these things popped up for me and it wasn't PMS because I wasn't near my period, I just assumed I'm going crazy. Literally. I'm not being sarcastic. I really thought that I was developing mental illness, which runs in my family, that I wouldn't be able to come back from. Because I was like, well, nothing's going on with my hormones because it's not PMS. Bullshit. Your hormones are at play every single freaking day of every single month, and different hormones show up in different ways. So for me, what I later realized was when I was having that massive spike of hormones that made me feel like life was terrible and hard and everyone hates me and my kids are the worst and the whole thing. Can I get a witness? Like, if you've ever felt like that, there is a point in your cycle, usually day 19 to day 21, where you have a hormone spike. And when that hormone spike happens, it makes you feel like a lunatic. Also, lunatic is based on a lunar. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, don't go too deep. Stay here, Rach. Anyway, infradian rhythm. Every single week of our cycle, different things are happening. One of my favorite books to read on this topic is called Period Power by Maisie Hill. And the reason I love that book is because it paints our cycle through the lens of, you have almost like a superpower that you could harness every single week of your cycle. If you've never tracked your period, your cycle starts the first day that you bleed. Not the first day that you spot, but the first day that you significantly bleed. That is day 1, and you start counting from there. When I had never tracked my cycle before, I just tracked it in my phone. I literally would put day 1, felt like this. Day 2, felt like this. Day 3, felt like this. Day 4, super hungry, ate everything in sight. Day 5, like I tracked any significant emotional feeling that I had. If I was really hungry, if I was really sleepy, if I had insomnia, if I had cramps, I tracked it all. And I did this for about 6 months, just in the notes on my phone, because it was always easy to access. And what was great was then when I would have these moments where I'm like, life's hard, everyone hates me, or like, why am I so bloated? Or why is this happening? Why is this happening? I could go back to that same day from the previous month or the month before that and be like, oh, this always happens on day 20. Always. Or this always happens. I always get insomnia during this week. So it just helped me to become aware of what my body was doing so that I could navigate around it. And I'm really privileged in that I make my own schedule. So if I'm aligned with my cycle, I can be aware to not book a really intense project or something really hard in a week where my body is just not going to have as much energy for it. So for instance, the week you are ovulating, is also the week you have the most energy. Your skin usually looks the best. People will be like, oh, she's glowing. She's got this vitality, she's just got this something extra. Yeah, it's the hormones in your body that are trying to attract a mate so that you can put a baby in this uterus that's working so hard with all these hormones. It's amazing because if you know that, you're like, this is the week for the pitch meeting. This is the week that I try and do a big sale. This is the week that I really focus in on my project. Or maybe it's the week of your actual period and you use that time. That's when we tend to be more introspective. We're usually very grounded during that week. We're more present in the space. And you could look at that and be like, oh, I'm sluggish, or I'm this, or I can't believe, and not see the incredible power that you have in going with your flow. There's also a good book by Lisa Vitti called In the Flow, and she has a ton of resources on this subject. But arm yourself with the knowledge of how powerful your body is. I realize in retrospect that from the time I was 12 until I was 37, I was essentially fighting my body every single month. Every single month, I would get my period and I would get pissed off. Every single month. I would be like, oh God, this, like so frustrated, so mad. Like, what does that do to us psychologically that we think something's wrong with us? I'm going to do a tour this summer. There's a lot of cities I didn't get to go to when I did the tour a few months back. So we're going to roll out some new cities. And I was working through what I wanted to talk about. And I was just like, I have to talk about periods for a second because it's nuts. At some point, if you have a uterus, it is likely, not saying everybody, but it's very likely that you will bleed. And over half of the world's population this happens to. And the half of the world's population that this happens to is also the people who make the other humans, right? We're going through this to make other, whether you choose to have a child or not, that is what your body's trying to do. It's like, hey, you can put a baby in here if you want to, whatever, like no big deal. If you don't, it's fine. I'll just bleed everywhere. It's fine. We are all going through this, but humans don't have, nobody has information about it. No, I was laughing, like crying, laughing, thinking about how nobody taught me to put a tampon in. Back when I was like 13, I was so sick of using pads and I knew tampons existed, but I didn't know how. And I grew up in a family where you did not talk about those things. I had 2 older sisters and a mom, and nobody told me anything, nothing about like, hey, this is what you should do so you don't bleed out. And this is what you should do. So no, you know me, guys, I'm a fixer. Okay. So I didn't want to wear pads. I was like, what are these things? What is this cotton thing? But if you don't know what's going on and you don't know your anatomy, you're essentially like stabbing yourself with a cotton knife. You're just like stabbing because you think that your vagina goes straight up inside of you and actually goes back. But you don't know that if nobody teaches you. And they damn sure didn't teach you that in sex ed. In sex ed, they taught us about, the fallopian tubes and the egg and the penis and the sperm and like all of this stuff that was not in any way relevant to my 12-year-old self. My 12-year-old self would have loved, like, here's not a model, that might be weird. Here's a dummy and this is how you put a, pad with wings on some chonies. Or like, here's some tampons, here's like a fake vagina. This is what you're going to do. How about the fact that you put that tampon in and like, I'm not, did I know that the applicator was supposed to come out? No, I did not. And I couldn't I like got it up there finally and then was like, surely this like cotton stick with these hard ridges, like this isn't supposed to just hang out of my business what? I must have been in that bathroom for hours, just like hemorrhaging blood and like trying to figure it out. And I remember when I finally figured out tampons, my best friend Kim was like, you have to tell me, because she didn't want to wear pads either. And I remember standing outside the door to the bathroom and Kim was crying and she was like, there's no hole. There is no hole. Rachel, I can't, you don't I'm like, I swear there's a hole. I didn't think there was a hole. There's a hole. It is nuts. What was I reading the other day? Oh, a great book. I think it's, I'll show myself out. Jessie Klein, I think. I shared it on Instagram. But she tells a story about like, explain to me why when I was in sex ed as a little kid, I had to learn about boys having nighttime emissions, but nobody talked to us about birth. It's nuts. I mean, I could go on this topic forever. Unfortunately, we live in a society that does not educate us about the most basic uses of our body. And unfortunately, we live in, at least me, a country that wants to medicate everything, most especially things that are just your body naturally doing what it's supposed to do. And I know that for a lot of people, birth control can be a godsend, right? It can be huge because they don't want to have any more kids, or they don't want to have kids at all, or they're not ready to have kids, and that's really helpful. The problem is that we are not given enough information about how taking birth control, either orally or through an IUD or through a patch or through a shot, can mess up and does mess up our body's natural hormone. The idea, I swear I'm going to get off the soapbox soon, the idea, those things where it's like, you you could get your period once a quarter or whatever. I can't even think of what they're called. Or basically it's like, oh, you don't get your period regularly, you'll just get it once a quarter. Or in what world would a medical professional think that that is okay? In what world would your body have a natural way of functioning and you just shut it off and think that there will be no ramifications? The amount of women I know that have struggled so desperately to have babies after they got off birth control, to get their hormones in check after they got off birth control. Like, we've all just become accustomed to this idea that like, oh yeah, I'm going to go on the birth control. It's going to make me batshit crazy. I'm not going to have any moisture during sex anymore. I'm going to be super dry, probably going to be bloated, but like, at least I won't get pregnant, because we're not taught any alternatives. Your body is incredible. And every single month when you get your period, your body is doing what it is meant to do. Shifting it from something bad is happening to, oh, okay, yeah, good work. Good work, uterus. Good work, everybody. Way to be. Thank you. And accepting it is life-changing from an emotional perspective, and I think from a loving yourself perspective. But also, I think my periods are better. I have less cramping. I'm less stressed about it. Like, all the things that were affecting me negatively when my period came went away as I started to embrace the fact that they were supposed to be there in the first place. Yes, I track my cycle. I started by doing it just in the notes section, Shay. When I finally got off all birth control and started to track was the first time that I realized that I get my period at the full moon, which I feel like is some super witchy shit, and I love it. Like, okay, yes, the moon is calling. It also is great because the full moon absolutely affects us as human beings. It does. It affects the tide. We are mostly made of water. When you feel super weird and out of sorts and crazy stuff happens at the full moon, that is why. So I just like that, that's when my period decides to come as well. It's also, I think, a really beautiful time for reflection. You have maybe heard me talk about my full moon ritual and how every full moon I ask myself, is there anything that I need to let go of? What do I need to let go of in order to become a better version of myself? And I feel like because I'm on my period, which is about release, you spend an entire lunar cycle coming back to this point where now it's time to release. So it just feels like it has a lot of emotional, spiritual meaning for me that it didn't used to. I highly encourage all of you to do your research, talk to your doctor, but more specifically, talk to a doctor who's a naturopath, not just your regular OBGYN, because it is really scary to me how much we are prescribed medicine. Oh, it's so scary to me, especially when it comes to hormones. When I saw that video from Hailey Bieber, like a year ago, about how she went on birth control for the first time and had a stroke. She was like 24. She had a stroke because she had a pre-existing condition where she should never have been on birth control. But we all just think it's super safe. It's not a big deal. And her doctor didn't check. And she had a stroke. It could have been horrific. So you owe it to yourself to arm yourself with personal knowledge, but to also make sure that whenever possible, you are talking to a doctor, being treated by a doctor that's not just someone writing a prescription, but someone who's actually listening and hopefully giving you 15 ideas that you can try before you go to a prescription that will affect the way your cycle is naturally supposed to be. And I will slide my soapbox out of the way and we'll carry on with our day. Guys, that's today's episode of Ask Rach. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking to me. If you have a question, and I feel like you must, you're going to call 737-400-4626. Leave it anonymously, leave it with your name, but I'd love to make this show about you and what you are interested in talking about, so let me know how I can help. I will be back soon with more information, and until then, remember, I love you and I'm rooting for you. What if the connection that you're looking for with your son, for anyone listening, with your partner, with your parents, with your best friend, with your sister, with your coworkers,